Y bien, la semana pasada estuvo en el Perú Tony Blair, pronunció una conferencia en la UPC. Tony Blair, ex primer ministro laborista que sucedió a Margaret Thatcher en Gran Bretaña, pronunció esta conferencia que hemos editado para, en fin, para que ustedes puedan apreciar lo interesante que fue. Escuchemos.
The challenges Peru faces today are challenges very familiar to countries that have achieved a lot, but now the question is, how do they get to the next level? And what I would like to do is to share with you in my opening remarks today some of the lessons that I had in 10 years of government, being Prime Minister. The first thing I would say is that the chief characteristic of today's world, and this is particularly important, I think, for the young generation to understand, the chief characteristic of today's world is the scope, the scale, and the speed of change. You know, change is happening so fast today. You know, when you go to a country like China and you see how they've lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty in the last 25 years, and you realize that in the future it will dominate the geopolitics of the world. And then you have India, population of over 1 billion people. Even a country like Indonesia today, 3 times the size of Germany. And you look at Africa and realize that in the last 10 years, 6 out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world have been in Africa. Right? Then you realize things are changing fast. So globalization is changing the world. Technology is changing the world. I had a conversation with my 12-year-old son the other day when I explained to him that when I was growing up, we didn't have mobile phones. He literally couldn't contemplate this. This was, you didn't have a mobile phone? You know, how did you live? Actually, there is, I should say, when I was Prime Minister, I was allowed no technology. Right? I didn't even have a mobile phone. Okay. So I got my first mobile phone the day after I left office. And so I was very excited. You know, I never had this technology. Now suddenly I had this mobile in my hand. So I'm not good with technology, but I decided to send an SMS, a text, you know, to an old friend saying, "Hi, how are you?" Right? So being ignorant, I did not realize my name did not automatically come up. Right? So I got a text back saying, "Sorry, but who are you?" And I remember sitting there thinking, it's been 24 hours. So yeah, it's the difference when you're out of government. So technology is changing the world. And then, of course, demography is changing the world. You know, the average age of Europe today is around about 40 years old. I've just been in Nigeria recently. The median age in Nigeria is 18. Right. In the Middle East, the population will double in the next 25 years. Right. So Latin America also, younger population. So globalization, technology, demography is changing the world and changing it fast. So what that means is, and this is the second point, is that citizens, communities and countries have to change also, because the world around us is changing so fast. And these changes are difficult to do. So if you take the single currency in Europe now, where we have major crisis and difficulty continuing, the real problem which the financial crisis has exposed, it's not created this problem, it's exposed this problem. The real problem is that the systems that we built in Europe after the war, in welfare, in pensions, in public services, in the way the state is run, all of these things are no longer fit for purpose because the world around us has changed so fast. So we're now having to reform our systems. And the problem with the crisis is we're having to make these changes in circumstances where there's very low growth and high unemployment. But truthfully, in the developed world, we're having to change because the world around us has changed fast. So for developing countries like Peru, you have a different challenge, but it's still the same challenge of change. Your challenge is around infrastructure, right? Roads and electricity and ports and airports and rail, right? Your challenge is around education. You know, how do you get quality education for the mass of the people? And it's about building institutions, because in previous years you've not had them. So whether you are in the developed world or developing world, all nations today are facing the challenge of change, and they've got to adapt their systems and reform them in order to meet that challenge. The third thing is that in order to succeed in that world, you have to be open to new ideas, open to new ways of doing, open to new ways of thinking, and open to new people. In other words, a world that is coming together through globalization and changing fast. If you want to succeed in that world, you've got to be open-minded, right? You've got to be prepared to embrace the new. And this is where education matters. The single most important thing about an education system in today's world, it's one reason why this group of universities is so good, is the education has to be an education that is not just about learning to pass exams. It is about learning to be open-minded. Because the difference in the world today is essentially between the open-minded and the closed-minded. Now, I see this out in the Middle East all the time. You know, what is the essential underlying problem of the Middle East? The essential underlying problem is that the systems there of the economy and education and the place of religion in politics means that very often people are closed-minded to the other when they need to be open-minded. Right? So you have a fantastic opportunity here if you are prepared to educate the new generation for that openness and are prepared yourselves as a country to open up the country to new ideas, new ways of doing, new ways of thinking. But fourthly, it's not enough for people to change. Actually, government and the way government works has also got to change. And this is very difficult. Governments don't like to change, right? Government is very resistant. I was saying to your president yesterday that I came to power in 1997, as Gonzalo said, after my party had been in opposition for almost 2 decades. You know, my party had come to think that government was really against them, and that the bureaucracy was really a conspiracy for the Conservatives and not for people from my party. Right. And after about 2 years, when I was in government, I said, no, we got this all wrong. It's not a conspiracy for the Conservatives, it's a conspiracy to do nothing. This is the characteristic of government. It basically, you can't get it to do anything. It's not for Conservatives or for Labour, it's for inertia. And in today's world, when countries have to change fast, then government also has to change. Otherwise, the people haven't got a government on their side that's helping them with this world of change. What does that mean? I think it means that what I've found in government is the challenge is not ideology. The challenge is efficacy. The challenge is how do you get things done? And that requires new systems, a new skill set, and also the willingness for those in the public service and government to be able to take the risks of action. Because the safe thing is always to do nothing. But if you need to do something, the system's got to allow the people in charge to do it. And to deliver that change, because in the end, the purpose of government is to improve the lives of people. So this is why government itself also has to change. And one way it can do that, by the way, is partnership between public and private sector, not conflict between the two. For countries to succeed today, they need a strong private sector and they need a government capable of setting the framework and empowering the country to succeed. And at crucial points, you need partnership between the two for them to be working together. So, I think the fourth lesson I've learned is that changing a country also means changing the way government works. And again, the good news is that the lessons of what works and what doesn't from government are pretty clear around the world today. What you can do today, if a government's smart about it, is it can learn the lessons from others. And the final lesson is this, that because of the way the world's changing, countries succeed today if they're part of the global community. In other words, you've got to think beyond your own boundaries and borders. And if you're a young person and you're working out how you succeed in life, you've got to think of yourselves as citizens of the world and not just citizens of Peru or the UK or America. Same with Peru. You've got to work out what part are you going to play in the region today. What are the right alliances to build? What are the right connections you're going to make north up to America, over to China? And one thing I learned, both in government and have learned since, those who meet this challenge of change best have an optimistic spirit within them. Cynical people never create anything. Commentators are always commentating. The future belongs to the open-minded and to people who can do things. And that's why when I look at the future now, I'm actually optimistic about it. I'm optimistic about your country. I'm optimistic about mine. If we understand how fast the world's changing and we're prepared to change with it. Thank you very much.
Extraordinario realmente Tony Blair, y pensar que él es laborista, es decir, socialista en Inglaterra, un socialismo moderno, por supuesto. Ojalá fueran así los nuestros. Vamos a una pausa y regresamos.